The sound of her fork against the plate was the loudest thing in the room. Not the humming of the fridge, not the faint music coming from the neighbor's house. Just that cold, sharp clink of metal against ceramic. I couldn't even force myself to look at her. It felt like if I did, she'd see every question swirling in my head, and I wasn't ready for that. "Why are you so quiet?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with something. Curiosity, maybe suspicion. She always had this way of asking questions like she already knew the answer. I didn't think, I didn't plan. I just looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Because everything." And it was true. Everything. The lipstick smudged on the wine glass that wasn't the shade she usually wears. The scent of someone else's cologne clinging faintly to her jacket last night. The late-night phone calls, the sudden bursts of laughter she never shares with me anymore. Everything felt like a knife twisting a little deeper each day. That silence after my words? It was like the room collapsed in on itself. She froze, her fork hovering in midair, her lips parting like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. Then, as if nothing had happened, she cut another piece of chicken, chewed it, and kept her eyes on the plate. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to ask her, "Who is he?" Because God, I feel it in my bones that there's someone else. But all I did was sit there, my chest tight, my hands clenched into fists under the table where she couldn't see. It didn't start with something big. That's the worst part. It's the little things that kill you. The new passwords on her phone. The way she started taking her showers at night, after her so-called late shifts, and how she always seemed to come back smelling like cologne, like warm cedar, and something sharp, something I don't wear. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself I was tired, overthinking. But then I saw it, just a flash. A name popping up on her screen. Elliot. No heart emojis, nothing romantic. Just a name. But the way she snatched the phone off the counter like it was a grenade, that was enough to make me sick. I haven't said a word to her about it. Not yet. I'm not ready for the storm that's coming. But every day, I feel it getting closer. Last night, after she went to bed, I walked into the kitchen and stared at the empty wine bottle on the counter. There were 2 glasses. One still had lipstick on it. I don't even remember pouring the second one. When she asked me at dinner why I was so quiet, I almost told her everything I'd been holding back. Because I know you've stopped looking at me the way you used to. Because when you smile at your phone, I know it's not me you're thinking of. Because I feel like I'm living in someone else's life now, someone else's house, with someone else's wife. But I didn't. I just said, because everything. And for the first time, I think she understood exactly what I meant. That night, after she went to bed, I stayed sitting at the kitchen table like a man waiting for a verdict. The room was dark except for the glow of the streetlights spilling through the blinds, making strange patterns across the floor. I stared at the 2 empty wine glasses and felt this heavy, crawling sensation in my gut. I hadn't touched wine all night. So why were there 2 glasses? I told myself I was overthinking, that maybe I'd used one earlier in the week, but I knew that was a lie. I know every detail of this house because I obsess over it. Over her, like a man clinging to the last thread of control. When I finally dragged myself upstairs, Nora was already asleep, her phone on the nightstand, face down as always. That tiny gesture, face down, hits me harder than any shouting match ever could. She used to fall asleep scrolling through our pictures, laughing at some meme she'd send me at 1 a.m. while lying right beside me. Now it's like she's hiding her entire life in that device. I stared at it for what felt like forever, my hand hovering an inch above the screen. Do I look? Do I go there? I didn't. I just stood there like a coward, watching her breathe, wondering if she dreamed of me or of someone else entirely. The next morning, I decided I couldn't live like this, just guessing. I needed answers, even if they destroyed me. So I did something I'm not proud of. I left work early, telling my boss I had a headache. But instead of heading home, I parked 2 blocks away from the hospital where Nora works. I felt like some desperate detective in one of those cheap TV dramas, sitting in my car with my hands shaking. Around 6:45, I saw her walk out. She wasn't in her scrubs, not even in her usual jeans and jacket. She was dressed up. A pale green dress I hadn't seen before, her hair loose around her shoulders. She was smiling. And she wasn't alone. There was a man walking beside her. I couldn't see his face at first. He was taller, wearing a dark coat. But I saw the way she tilted her head toward him, laughing at something he said. It wasn't the fake polite laugh she gives strangers. It was the kind of laugh she used to give me when I was the center of her world. My chest tightened like someone was pressing a brick against it. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just sat there watching them walk into a cafe on the corner, his hand brushing lightly against her back. I should have stormed in there, should have demanded to know who he was. But instead I just sat in my car like a ghost. My mind kept replaying the moment from dinner, her asking why I was so quiet, and me saying, because everything. I wondered if she thought about that while sipping her coffee with him, or if I was just a background character in her story now. I waited outside for nearly an hour, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. When she finally came out, she wasn't smiling anymore. She looked tired, like someone coming back from a life that didn't belong to me. She didn't see me. She just got into her car and drove home like nothing happened. That night, I couldn't even sit across from her at dinner. I mumbled something about being tired and went upstairs early, locking myself in the bathroom to stare at my own reflection. I looked like a stranger. Hollow eyes, clenched jaw, and a single thought burning in my mind. If I keep quiet, I'll go insane. But if I speak, I might destroy everything. I don't know which scares me more. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her leaning in closer to that man, smiling in a way she hasn't smiled at me in months. By the time morning came, I convinced myself that I needed answers more than I needed to breathe. Pretending like everything was fine, like this was just paranoia, was eating me alive. So, I did something I've never done before. I called in sick, waited for her to leave for work, and then I tore through the house like a man possessed. I wasn't proud of it. Every drawer I opened felt like I was crossing a line I could never uncross. I checked her nightstand first, nothing but a few books and a charger. I checked her closet, digging through her bags and pockets like some pathetic detective. And then I found it. A small, folded piece of paper, tucked in the pocket of a jacket she hadn't worn in weeks. My hands were trembling as I unfolded it. There was a name written in a messy scrawl. Elliot, just like the text notification I'd seen, and a phone number. No explanation. No context. Just that. My stomach turned cold. I stood there staring at that piece of paper for what felt like hours, wondering if this was the proof I'd been too afraid to find. By the time Nora came home that evening, I'd shoved the paper back where I found it. I acted normal, if you can call it that. She was distracted, talking about her day, but I barely heard a word. I just nodded and smiled like I wasn't dying inside. Later that night, while she was in the shower, I wrote the number down and stared at it for a good 10 minutes. I considered calling, just to see who would answer. I even typed the number into my phone and hovered over the call button, but my hand froze. What would I even say? Hi, I'm Nora's husband. Who the hell are you? It sounded ridiculous in my head. Instead, I saved the number under a fake contact name, just a single letter, E, and told myself I'd find another way. But fate didn't wait. 2 nights later, something happened that pushed me over the edge. We were watching TV. Well, she was watching. I was pretending. I caught her reflection in the screen, the way her face lit up when her phone buzzed. She picked it up instantly, smiling down at the screen like I wasn't even there. I saw the name Elliot flash across for just a split second before she tilted the phone away. I didn't say a word, but my blood felt like it was boiling. I waited. I watched. I listened as she excused herself to the kitchen, whispering into the phone like a teenager hiding from her parents. I followed her, quiet as I could, and caught just one line. Her saying, "No, he's right here. I can't talk now. Later. Later." I felt my throat close up, like someone had shoved a fist down my windpipe. I wanted to storm in there, grab the phone, demand to know who he was. But instead, I backed away, quietly, like a coward, and sat back on the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone as she came back into the room with that fake smile plastered on her face. That night, I decided I was done waiting for the truth to fall into my lap. I needed to see it. I needed proof. And if that meant sinking lower than I ever thought I could, then so be it. So, I made a plan. By the time the weekend rolled around, I was a man on autopilot. Every second of the day was filled with a single thought. I need to know. I couldn't keep sitting across from her at dinner, pretending to listen to her stories about work, while every instinct inside me screamed that there was someone else. It wasn't even about anger anymore. It was about sanity. I felt like my mind was tearing itself apart with every unanswered question. Saturday morning, I woke up before dawn. She was still asleep, breathing softly beside me, her hand curled into a loose fist on the blanket. I watched her for a moment, wondering how many lies she had told me with those same lips I used to kiss without a second thought. I got up quietly and left the house under the excuse of grabbing coffee, but that wasn't the plan. Not at all. I drove to an electronics store as soon as it opened and bought something I never thought I'd buy, a small GPS tracker. The kind you stick under a car, the kind meant for peace of mind, as the sales clerk called it. I nodded like I was just another worried dad wanting to know where his teenage kid goes on weekends. But inside, my hands were shaking as I paid for it. Because the truth was, I wasn't ready for what I might find. When I got home, Nora was still in bed, scrolling through her phone with that faint smile she tries to hide. I kissed her cheek, told her I was going for a run, and slipped into the garage where her car was parked. I felt like a criminal, crouched down, attaching that tiny device to the frame of her car. I could hear my own pulse pounding in my ears, the voice in my head screaming, "What are you doing, Warren? What if she finds it? What if you find out something you can't come back from?" But I did it anyway. The first time I tracked her, I told myself I wouldn't look too hard. That lasted all of 2 hours. While she was at work, the little red dot on my phone showed her car parked nowhere near the hospital. Instead, it was across town, in a neighborhood I didn't recognize, near a row of apartments. I stared at the screen, feeling my throat tighten. I couldn't decide whether to drive there myself or sit in my car screaming. By the time she came home that night, I had already built 1,000 stories in my head. I watched her take off her shoes, drop her bag by the door, and walk straight past me like I was invisible. She looked different. Not guilty, not nervous, just distant, like I wasn't even part of her day. We ate dinner in silence. She scrolled through her phone while I tried not to stare at her, every sound of her typing making my chest ache. Then, as if nothing was wrong, she looked up and smiled. "Want to watch something tonight?" she asked, like we were just two people living a normal, happy life. I nodded. I even forced a smile. But inside, I was planning my next move. The next day, I followed her. Not just with the tracker. I followed her in my car, staying 2 cars behind, my palms sweating so much I could barely grip the wheel. She drove straight to that same apartment complex, parked, and sat in her car for a few minutes like she was gathering courage. Then she got out, and that's when I saw him. Elliot. At least, I assumed it was him. He was leaning casually against the railing, tall and confident, like the world had handed him every lucky card in the deck. He smiled when he saw her. Not a polite smile, not a friendly smile, a smile that made my stomach turn. She walked right up to him, and I swear, for a second, I thought she was going to kiss him. She didn't. Not then. But she touched his arm, laughing softly, and they went inside together. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my fingers went numb. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. I told myself maybe it was innocent, maybe it was something I didn't understand. But deep down I knew. I just knew. When she came home that night, I couldn't even look at her. She asked me if I was feeling okay, and all I said was, "Yeah, I'm fine," while every nerve in my body screamed that nothing would ever be fine again. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, thinking about how everything in our life, our house, our memories, even the bed we share, felt like it was crumbling around me. I knew I couldn't keep this inside forever. I needed to confront her. I needed to hear the truth, no matter how much it destroyed me. But I also knew that if I came at her empty-handed, she'd twist it. She'd make me doubt myself. So I made a decision. I would get proof. Real proof. And the way I'd get it? That would change everything. By the time the next weekend came around, I'd built a storm inside my head. The tracker told me everything I needed to know. Her car kept showing up at that same apartment complex, like clockwork, on the nights she claimed to be working late. It was no longer about suspicion. It was about proof. Cold, undeniable proof. I wanted to see it with my own eyes, even if it broke me. Maybe especially if it broke me. Because at least then, I wouldn't be living in this endless loop of doubt, half believing, half denying what I already knew deep down. Saturday night, I told Nora I was going out with an old friend. She barely looked up from her phone. "Have fun," she said, her voice flat, distracted, like I wasn't even there. It was the kind of casual dismissal that used to be nothing, but now it burned through me. I walked out, got into my car, and parked a block away from our house, waiting like some desperate, pathetic spy. I watched as, an hour later, she came out, dressed up again, Her green dress, the same one I'd seen that day at the cafe. She looked beautiful, and it hurt, because she didn't look beautiful for me. I followed her from a distance. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it through the windshield. She drove across town, her car a dark shape against the streetlights, until she pulled into that same complex. I killed my headlights and waited, watching her walk up the stairs. And then he appeared, Elliot. He was waiting for her. They didn't hesitate this time. He leaned in, and she let him. A quick kiss, like it wasn't their first, like it was something natural, something they'd done 100 times. My whole body went cold, like my blood had been replaced with ice. It was the moment I'd feared, and it felt worse than I ever imagined. I stayed there for nearly an hour, just staring at the building, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I thought about driving home, packing her things, throwing them on the lawn. I thought about walking up to that apartment, knocking on the door, and tearing their little secret into shreds right there. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I grabbed my phone and took pictures. I felt like the lowest kind of man, hiding in the dark, but I needed something concrete, something she couldn't lie her way out of. When she came home that night, I was sitting at the table, staring at the wall like a man who'd seen a ghost. She walked in with that casual smile, kissed me on the cheek like nothing had happened, and said, "Long night, huh?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to shove the pictures in her face and demand to know why. But I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. She went upstairs to shower, humming to herself while I sat there, every muscle in my body shaking with anger I couldn't release. I knew I needed to wait, to be calm. If I confronted her now, I'd explode, and she'd just deny it, twist it, make me the villain. I needed a plan that would make her tell the truth, whether she wanted to or not. The next day, I told her I'd be out of town for work. A lie, of course. I left in the morning, suitcase and all, pretending like I was heading for the airport. But instead, I circled back around and parked near the complex, waiting like some shadow no one noticed. Hours went by. I sat in the car, staring at the entrance, every passing second feeding this storm inside me. Around 6 p.m., her car pulled in. She didn't even hesitate. She went straight inside, not even glancing around, like this had become routine for her. I waited 10 minutes, then got out of the car. I don't know what I thought I'd do. Maybe I'd knock. Maybe I'd barge in. My heart was pounding so hard I felt dizzy as I walked toward the stairs. But just as I was about to go up, the door to the apartment opened. Elliot stepped out, laughing, and I froze. He had his hand on her shoulder, and she was smiling like I hadn't seen in years. They didn't see me. They just stood there, talking quietly, like they were the only two people in the world. And in that moment, I knew. I couldn't pretend anymore. That night, I didn't go home. I drove for hours, aimless, the pictures I'd taken burning a hole in my pocket. By the time I got back to the house, it was past midnight. Nora was asleep, her phone on the nightstand, face down like always. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at her, wondering when exactly she stopped loving me. Or maybe the better question was when she decided I wasn't worth telling the truth to. I have the proof now. I have everything I need to confront her. But a part of me wonders, what if I just don't? What if I stay silent, keep rotting from the inside, because the truth feels heavier than this slow, painful decay? Tomorrow, I'll decide. Tomorrow, I'll know if I'm ready to burn it all down. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of pounding headache that feels like someone's splitting your skull open with a hammer. Nora was already up, making coffee in the kitchen like nothing was wrong. The smell filled the house, but it made me nauseous. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the floor, thinking about the pictures on my phone. They were there, undeniable. Proof that what I feared wasn't just in my head. I could end it right now. I could walk downstairs, slam my phone on the table, and watch her face crumble. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I realized something terrifying, I didn't just want to catch her. I wanted to hear her say it. I wanted to watch her try to lie one last time, just so I could see if she was even capable of looking me in the eye while doing it. When I went downstairs, she looked up at me with that bright, empty smile. "Morning," she said, like she hadn't just spent the night before with someone else. Her hair was damp from a shower, her robe loosely tied, and she was humming. Humming. I wanted to tear that fake normalcy apart. I grabbed a mug, poured myself some coffee, and sat down across from her. I could feel her watching me, waiting for me to say something. I didn't. I just stared at her. After a while, she tilted her head and asked, "Are you okay? You've been quiet lately." And that's when it slipped out of me again. "Because everything," I said, my voice low, steady, almost too calm. She blinked, confused. "Everything what?" she asked. I leaned back in my chair and looked at her like I was seeing her for the first time. I didn't answer. I wanted her to feel the silence for once, the same silence I've been living in for months. It worked. She shifted in her seat, suddenly uncomfortable, like she knew I was staring through her, past her smiles, past the act she was putting on. That afternoon, I did something I swore I wouldn't do. I called the number. Elliot's number. I blocked my own caller ID, so he wouldn't know it was me, and I waited as it rang. When he answered, his voice was casual, warm, like someone who had no idea how much destruction he'd caused. "Hello," he said. I froze. My mouth went dry. I couldn't speak. I hung up. My hand was shaking so bad I nearly dropped the phone. That one word, that casual hello, made it real. He wasn't just a name or a suspicion anymore. He was a living, breathing person who had been with my wife while I sat at home like an idiot. I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel, breathing like I'd just run a marathon. I needed to confront her. No more games. That night, I didn't wait for dinner. I didn't wait for the quiet, for her fake smiles. As soon as she walked through the door, I told her to sit down. My voice was sharper than I meant it to be, but I didn't care. She frowned, setting her bag on the table, clearly thrown off by my tone. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice careful. I didn't answer her question. I just pulled out my phone, opened the photos, and slid it across the table. The image of her and Elliot standing too close, his hand on her back, was all the words I needed. She stared at it, frozen, like her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. I waited for her to say something, anything. After what felt like a lifetime, she whispered, "Warren, I can explain." Those 4 words. I wanted to laugh in her face. "Explain what?" I said, my voice shaking. "Explain why you've been lying to me for months? Explain why you kiss him like I don't exist? Go ahead, Nora, I'm all ears." She just sat there, pale and trembling, her mouth opening and closing like she didn't know which lie to pick. And then, to my shock, she didn't deny it. She didn't say I was imagining things or accuse me of being paranoid. She just looked down and started crying. Quiet, pitiful crying, like she was the victim here. I didn't know what to do. I thought I'd feel relief, that catching her would give me closure, but all I felt was hollow. Empty, like I'd lost more than just her. She finally spoke through her tears, saying things like, "It wasn't supposed to happen," and "I was lonely. You've been distant." I couldn't even process it. All I could think was that every memory we'd built was now poisoned. Every time I thought about our life together, all I'd see would be Elliot's hand on her back, his smile, her laugh that used to belong to me. I walked out. I left her sitting at that table, crying into her hands. I didn't grab my coat, didn't take my keys. I just walked out into the night air, breathing hard, trying not to fall apart right there on the sidewalk. But as I walked aimlessly around the block, I realized something that hit me like a punch to the chest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because something about her reaction, those words, the way she cried, didn't feel right. It wasn't just guilt. It was fear. And I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she was hiding, whatever the truth was, I'd only scratched the surface. I didn't come home that night. I drove aimlessly for hours, stopping once at a 24-hour gas station just to sit in the parking lot and stare at the dim fluorescent lights. I thought confronting her would bring some kind of closure, but instead, I felt more confused than ever. Her crying, her fearful crying, wasn't the kind of guilt you expect from someone caught cheating. It was raw, trembling, almost like she was terrified of something I couldn't see. And the way she said, "It wasn't supposed to happen," kept echoing in my head. What exactly wasn't supposed to happen? When I finally returned, the house was dark except for the dim kitchen light. She was sitting at the table, still in her robe, eyes red and swollen, as if she hadn't moved since I left. I half expected her to start screaming at me, to accuse me of invading her privacy, of following her. But she didn't. She just looked at me, her face pale, and whispered, "We need to talk." Those 4 words sent a chill down my spine, because I could hear it in her voice. There was more to this than just another man. I sat down across from her, my hands clenched on the table, waiting for her to start. She didn't look at me. She stared at her coffee cup, fingers tracing the rim like she was stalling for time. Finally, she said, "You think you know what's going on, but you don't. It's not what you think, Warren." I laughed bitterly. "Not what I think. I have pictures, Nora. Pictures of you with him. Tell me what I'm supposed to think when I see my wife kissing another man." My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. She flinched, but didn't deny it. Instead, she said something that made my stomach drop. "It's not an affair. Not in the way you think. I can't explain it here. Not now." I stared at her, completely thrown off. "Not in the way I think. What the hell does that mean? Either you're with him or you're not, Nora. There's no middle ground." She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes again. "You don't understand. If I tell you, it'll ruin everything. You'll think I'm insane." That night ended with no answers. I slept on the couch, or rather, I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling while my thoughts twisted into knots. By morning, I'd had enough of her cryptic nonsense. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. I drove back to that apartment complex, my hands tied on the steering wheel. I needed to see this Elliot guy again, face to face, not just in a grainy picture. I parked nearby and waited. Around noon, I saw him come out, dressed casually in jeans and a black jacket. He didn't look like some suave, perfect man who'd steal my wife away. He looked ordinary, too ordinary. That's what made it worse. I followed him. He drove across town, not to a bar or some romantic hideout, but to this rundown strip mall with a shady-looking office space above it. I sat in my car, watching him disappear inside. The building didn't have any signs, no names, just dusty windows and a single flickering light by the door. Something about it made my skin crawl. Why would my wife be meeting someone here? I waited for nearly an hour, fighting with my thoughts, until I decided I couldn't just sit there anymore. I walked up to the building, my pulse hammering in my ears. I peered through one of the grimy windows, but all I saw was a long hallway and dim fluorescent lights. I was about to leave when I heard voices, muffled, but one of them was hers. Nora's voice. I don't remember deciding to do it, but suddenly I was inside, creeping up the hallway like some lunatic. I followed the sound of her voice until I reached a door that was slightly ajar. I could see her through the crack, standing there with Elliot. They weren't touching, but the tension in the room was suffocating. Then I heard her say it. "Does he know about the money?" I froze. "Money? What money?" I pressed closer, my heart pounding. Elliot's voice was calm but firm. "No. And he can't know, Nora. If he finds out, this whole thing blows up. We're already walking on thin ice." My entire body went cold. I didn't know what they were talking about, but it was clear this wasn't just a romantic affair. It was something else, something deeper and far uglier. I stepped back, my head spinning. I wanted to burst in and demand answers, but my instincts told me not to. Not yet. I needed to know what game they were playing before I confronted either of them. That night, I came home and pretended like nothing had happened. She asked how my day was, and I smiled. I even kissed her forehead. But inside, I was screaming. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife anymore. I was dealing with something far darker, and I had no idea how deep it went. All I knew was this. I wasn't going to stop until I found out the truth. And I had a feeling that the truth would be far worse than anything I'd imagined. The next day, I decided I couldn't keep living in this dark spiral of suspicion and half-truths. I needed to know everything, even if it meant tearing open the last shred of hope I had. I waited until Nora came home that evening, and this time, I didn't try to act normal. I stood there in the kitchen, holding the pictures I had taken of her and Elliot, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. "We're not doing this dance anymore," I said quietly. "Tell me everything, Nora. Right now. No lies, no games." She froze. Her face went pale, but then something shifted. She didn't cry this time, and she didn't deny anything. She simply sat down at the table, as if the weight of what she'd been hiding had finally crushed her. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You want the truth? You're going to hear all of it. And when I'm done, you'll hate me for not telling you sooner." For the next 20 minutes, I sat there in silence as she poured out a story that blindsided me. Elliot wasn't her lover. He was an old friend from nursing school, someone she hadn't seen in years until recently. Months ago, she'd gotten into something complicated, something she'd been too scared to tell me about. It turned out her younger brother, a guy I've always known as a screw-up, had gotten tangled in some bad business and owed a dangerous amount of money to the wrong people. Nora, being who she is, had stepped in to save him. She had taken out loans and was secretly trying to pay it off before I found out. Elliot, now working as a financial consultant, had been helping her navigate it without sinking us both into debt. The late nights, the secrecy, the whispered phone calls, it all started to make sense. "I didn't tell you," she said, tears brimming in her eyes, "because I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me now. I was terrified you'd think I was reckless or stupid, or that I didn't trust you enough to come to you. I'm so sorry, Warren. I've been trying to fix this mess so it wouldn't touch our life, but I only made it worse." I sat there, stunned. It was like every piece of anger I'd been holding on to had nowhere to go. All the paranoia, the sleepless nights, the fury, it all melted into something I didn't expect: shame. She wasn't betraying me. She was trying to protect me, in her own misguided way. I felt like the biggest fool alive for assuming the worst, for letting my mind poison me to the point where I followed her like some jealous stranger. I reached across the table, my hand shaking, and took hers. "You should have told me," I said, my voice breaking. "We're supposed to be a team, Nora. I don't care how bad it is. We face it together. Always." She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks, and for the first time in months, it felt like we were on the same side again. The next day, we sat down together and looked at every debt, every dollar. It wasn't as bad as I'd feared, but it was enough to scare us both into taking action. Elliot met with us, explaining how to restructure the payments and get out of the hole faster. It was awkward at first, but he didn't seem like the villain I'd made him out to be. He was just a guy trying to help an old friend. It's been 2 weeks since that night, and something has changed between us. We're closer now, in a way we hadn't been for years. We stopped pretending everything was fine and started talking, really talking, about the hard things, the scary things, the things couples avoid because they're afraid of breaking the illusion of perfection. It's not perfect now, but it's real. And that's better. Last night, we had dinner, just the two of us. It was quiet, but not in that heavy, suffocating way it used to be. She looked at me across the table, smiling softly, and asked, "Why are you so quiet?" I looked her in the eyes, and this time, I smiled back. "Because everything's okay," I said. And for the first time in months, I meant it.